let's get started. So first off, we'll have each of the panelists tell us about your current job position, how you got to your current position, and what you do on a typical day. So I will start with Brian. We'll go alphabetically, at least on the first one, and then we'll switch it up. So Brian, you're up.
Yeah, great questions. Lots to talk about. So I'll start by saying, yeah, so my job is kind of as the introduction described, really helping the Common App make sense of the data that we receive on a regular basis. We are a new team at the Common App, and our data warehouse, whereby we're kind of like very systematically keeping track of everything and putting it into analyzable format, is relatively new. It's, I think, 3 years old as of today. And so the long story short is there's just so much. And for those who are not familiar, the Common App is a organization that helps students apply to colleges in a way that allows them to fill out kind of like one application, but it can send to many institutions. It started as a platform primarily for highly selected institutions back in the day, but now we serve over 1,000 institutions across the United States and across the world that accept applications from us. And we have over 1 million students applying through the Common App every single year. So there's a lot of data, not just from students, but also from counselors and teachers who recommend those students and provide forms and references for their students. We also have a ton of information from our member institutions as far as who applies to them, their volume, their changes over time, the questions that they ask of students individually. And so there's just a lot of information to make sense of. My job in my eyes is really figuring out how can we make sense of this information to understand what's going on, find inequities in the process, find inefficiencies in the process, and then figure out really interesting, creative ways and solutions and programs to address those inequities in a more systematic way and hopefully make the college application process less miserable for more people, more equitable for more people, and more accessible for as many people who are interested in these opportunities as possible. So that's the big elevator pitch. The day-to-day is much less glamorous, obviously. It involves a lot of sitting down, working with my team, and figuring out and prioritizing of the many, many things that we could be looking at, of the many, many data elements that we have that we just haven't had time or capacity to really dig into. What do we want to focus on? What do we think is the highest value? And what do we think is going to have the most impact in helping us understand what we can do to make this whole process better? So because we're a relatively new team and super exciting because literally anything that we can look at has not ever been looked at before at the scale that we have. And we are in the process of appending to our application data that we get from students and teachers and counselors, really long-term outcomes like admit data, like enrollment data, like college graduation data, and seeing relationships between things like where did a student go to high school and where did they go to college and what are their outcomes after that. There's just a lot of really rich relationships to make sense of, and especially when we think about things like wanting to make sure that students from all backgrounds are able to access and succeed in higher education. There's just a lot that we can learn and bring to bear to hopefully guide policymakers, institutional leaders, and other practitioners into figuring out what to do. So it's a lot of meetings, lots of talking, lots of figuring out what to do. And then fundamentally a lot of data work, a lot of sitting down with big data sets, trying to figure out exactly what's going on, working with people on my team, some senior data scientists that we've just recently hired to just really parse through what's the best way to get at this really complicated dynamic that we want to understand better. And then once we understand it, how do we explain it to others and communicate it in ways that are hopefully going to help drive meaningful action? So there's a lot of that. And then there's a lot of program support. We do a lot of data-driven programs here at the Common App, targeting students with specific supports, specific opportunities, things like scholarships, and figuring out what's the best way to target those things, identify those students, and so on. So I feel like I'm talking a lot, so I'm going to leave it there for now.
Sounds great. Really interesting. Haley, you're up.
Yeah, definitely. Hi, everyone. My name's Haley. I am currently a field data scientist at a MLOps startup called Arthur. And so MLOps is really that like niche space in the product world of building out tooling that can help operationalize teams trying to put machine learning into production. Arthur is a company that is focused on like responsible AI, in particular, kind of after you put a model into production, monitoring it, understanding where it's going wrong, and like retraining the model. All context that I can dive into or not. It does not matter for the questions, but or like if people finding those interesting. But yeah, I think it's interesting to kind of talk about how I got there. So I went to the University of Wisconsin for both my bachelor's and master's. I did some awesome research under Alan, and I really fell in love with machine learning as a way to like solve interesting problems and kind of like dive into a research topic. But then as I was leaving school, I kind of realized that one of the areas that I was like most interested in like figuring out more about was actually like how it works in practice. So like kind of like taking all of those like research things that I had been working on and like seeing how companies apply them. And so with that, I fell naturally into product. And so I started off at like a ad tech company in like a product data scientist role. So like a nice mix between like being a product owner and kind of like driving like the business that way. And then also like more of like a traditional like day in, day out data scientist of like wrangling, cleaning things up, like A/B testing and such. And then from there, I transitioned into my role now at Arthur, which is kind of a customer engineer. So it's a lot of in the day to day on the, I guess like, I don't know, it's like pre-sales and post-sales almost, but on like pre-sales, like talking to like predominantly like enterprise customers about like their AI workflows, like working with their data scientists to like understand their problems, and then working with them hopefully to engage our own solution and being like, oh wow, perfect, it's the perfect fix. But also in like a lot of like almost even consulting, because it is like the startup space of helping them solve like whatever like MLOps problem they're really tackling. So yeah, I guess day in, day out, Jupyter notebooks all the way through. But yeah, happy to dive in more with further questions.
Excellent. Thank you. Megan.
Hi, everyone. I'm Megan Hoyer from the Washington Post. I have also, like Brian, am leading a fairly new team. The data journalism team at the Post has been around for 3 years, but there have been data journalists at the Post for many decades. So part of my role is to kind of pull all these people together who are doing data work across the newsroom and kind of standardize our practices and processes, raise the bar a little bit as to our technical skill set, and also just kind of make our work a little bit more replicable and easier to reuse. So a regular day for me is a lot of meetings where we have 12 reporters who are embedded across the newsroom. So we have people in our climate team and our investigative team and sports, in our well-being team, health team, local coverage. And all of those reporters are working on different stories, basically using data to try to help quantify situations that we're seeing on the ground in our reporting. Sometimes a reporter brings a story to us or an idea to us and tries to figure out, like, is there data that might be able to help us quantify how often this is happening, or what trends might be happening here. Sometimes we're bringing ideas to the reporters. So we pitched a big project last year about America's declining life expectancy that turned into like a 7 or 8 story project that published in November and December. So that's a little bit about what I do, how I got here. I am definitely the odd man out on this panel. I started as a police reporter. I have 2 degrees in writing, and I was a reporter on the ground for a number of years, but always had a kind of math quant background a little bit in terms of wanting to examine a little bit more about trends that I was seeing as a reporter on the ground. So started off in Excel spreadsheets. Along the way, taught myself to code. I am the weakest coder on our team of 13 people, but we have a variety of folks on our team, people who came up in the traditional journalism space and have taught themselves or have learned elsewhere. We have folks who are from software engineering backgrounds. We have a PhD on our team who is a neurobiologist. It's kind of a very wide mix of backgrounds that got us to data journalism. But generally, our combined spirit is we are intensely curious and also very skeptical.
Can you describe your day-to-day?
My day-to-day today, I've talked about international sanctions, police shootings, Medicare fraud. That's a story that will be going up. Taylor Swift, the Super Bowl, and how companies pay less than minimum wage to folks with disabilities. So that was my morning. But that is oftentimes how my life is. So we hit data from many, many different places, everything from geospatial analysis to just wrangling large data sets, cleaning up federal data, but also from private data providers, things like that. So it's a very wide-ranging group of topics and a very wide-ranging source of data. We do a lot of our own manual data collection as well.
Excellent. Very interesting. All right, Mohammed, you're up.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Mohammed. I'm from Ghana. So I work on Google weather forecasting. Actually, we call it nowcasting. So nowcasting is forecasting up to 24 hours. And my team is focused on some specific way of doing nowcasting. Usually, nowcasting is done by using ground stations and ground radars, but we are trying to do nowcasting using satellite imagery and geospatial analysis, which is quite different from the usual one. So currently, I work as a data infrastructure engineer. Basically, I manage data, I identify different data sources, evaluate them, and also work on partnership when Google wants to acquire some data. I work on analyzing those data and making sure they are up to our standard. And also, basically, my day-to-day activity would be just sitting behind a computer and coding. I do a lot of coding. So I also work across team and build infrastructures for analyzing geospatial data for Google Maps and also Google Earth Engine. So on those frameworks I work on, internal users do complain about some stuff. So I try to see which are the most important things to fix per day, and I try to address those as well. If I'm not doing those two, I'll be probably doing some data analysis because most of my team members are researchers and they'll be training models. So I'll do initial data analysis and feature selection. Yeah, and additionally, how I got to Google. So Google is actually my first job. So I graduated from Addis Ababa University in Bachelor Science in Software Engineering after its 5 years program. Then after that, I attended a boot camp called A2SV. So on that boot camp, I learned about algorithm, data structure, and a little bit more about distributed systems and computer science in general. Then someone who worked at Google actually referred me to apply at Google. Then I applied, and I think after 5 months after my graduation, I started working at Google.
Excellent. Cool. Well, very interesting to see such a wide range of backgrounds and different paths to get into data science. So this is the career panel after all. So let's jump into a slightly different topic. If you're looking for a team member to join your team, what makes a resume stand out? So kind of two questions in this one. So first is what makes a resume stand out? And the second one is how has networking influenced your career? So what are you looking for in a resume, and how has networking influenced your career? Meghan, we'll put you on the spot first.
Okay, I'll take the second part first. Networking has been enormously helpful in my career. I've probably gotten at least one job, probably two jobs, almost directly from Twitter. And being on Twitter over the years, the data journalism community is fairly small. There are maybe about 1,500 of us. So it's very much an insular place where you know a lot of the names and like a lot of what people are doing, which can be great, and it can be like a little bit problematic when you are doing the second part, which is looking for people, because we get a lot of applications from folks you're very intimately familiar with because it is a small universe. But every once in a while, we get applications from people who have not tried data journalism before. I've hired several people this was their first job in data journalism. And I will say the things I am always looking for in a resume, I've been lucky enough to hire a good number of people in the last couple of years, are that curiosity. I really like to know how people learn. I look very much less at the languages they, know how to use and things like that, and very much more at how they learn to use those languages better and how they level themselves up. I also look really intensely at their level of skepticism because I think as a journalist, it's pretty much inherently important that you know that any data set has its flaws, either in how it was collected or in how it's presented. And we need to understand those flaws and know the limitations of our data when we're telling stories with it.
All right, excellent. Haley, we'll go to you next.
Perfect. Yeah, I will say for resume, I have not had the privilege of being a hiring manager yet, but I have sat in on a number of different of like the hiring panels and like the screening process of different roles. One thing that like I don't necessarily screen for by the time it gets to me, but like I always give as advice is like we're all in a data science, like AI centric world. Like unfortunately, they go through the PDF screenings, especially for like larger companies or even like Workable or everything like that goes through it. So making sure that it's formatted in a way that like those processes can really read is like more helpful for even like getting it to the point of me seeing it. So there's things like My Perfect Resume that you can do for like $1, but then make sure you quit and then transfer it to Google Drive, because then otherwise they'll charge you like $15 a month. I got caught in that right after I graduated school. But so I think, yeah, like formatting it in a way that is legible. And then, yeah, I tend to look at a lot of like previous projects as well as like, yeah, it's a lot less like tools driven of like listing out like every Python library you've ever worked with, but in a lot more of even candidates will use that like STAR approach where it's like the understanding like what the problem was, how they went to resolve it, and like what the outcome was can be really helpful in like listing out a resume. And then in terms of networking, I think that networking has definitely influenced my career a lot. I have yet to like directly get like say like a job from networking or reaching out, but I definitely have found like a lot of like really good mentors or like people to ask questions to through networking, which like I'm sure will help me like later in the line, like even more so maybe. But I think that one of like the best piece of advice that I got after graduating was really to like reach out wide, especially, I mean, I did people that went to UW because I went to UW, but and like asking people to like ask questions about like what their job is. So it's like one of those things where it can be a lot to like get inbounds of like, oh, like you work here, like I'd like to work there like one day. But it's like another thing to just like ask people like, hey, like I'm interested in understanding what product is, or I'm interested in understanding like what like data journalism or like something like that is. Like if you have 20 minutes, like I'd love to like understand how you got there, because like most people are like tend to try and be like helpful or answer questions. So yeah, I've gotten pretty good with that, but it's a hard cold emailing skill set. So good luck. Hopefully it's good.
Excellent. Thank you. Mohammed.
Okay. So I second what Haley said, especially about formatting your resume. I actually attended a couple of sessions and seminars on how to format my CV before I started my application. And there are a couple of tips I got, and especially after seeing like some of the senior pupils. So one thing I kind of noticed, especially here at Google, is like everyone tries to quantify whatever they did in their CV. Like especially rather than saying like I built this data infrastructure that ingests this data or processes this data, they will say like I built this infrastructure that analyze like 2 terabytes of data per second or something. They try to quantify it. I think that's a good idea, especially like to highlight your achievements. And also, I think having like a simpler CV is a good idea, like rather than using a large template or like with a lot of icons. I think having like something like a Word doc is better, because I think now most of the CVs are analyzed by ATS, and I heard they are not really good at detecting these images, trying to analyze like whether they are covered into percent or something like that. So I think doing it that way is could be useful. And also like trying to use like some action verb like develop and analyze or something like that, rather than just writing lengthy description. So when it's come to how connections affected like my career, I think I wouldn't be here and if I didn't know someone named like Emre. He used to work at Google, so I wouldn't be here if he didn't refer me. So even after I got here, like I knew knowing the right people and getting mentorship was a good idea. So I often reach out. So that's why I was able to like kind of grow in my career, and I think got promoted within a year and stuff. And I think that is really useful. Like I don't know how to advise people to continuously reach out and learn more, but it's really important. Like you cannot go further without like knowing a lot of people, I guess.
Excellent. It's cool to see these themes, be consistent. We'll see what Brian has to say.
Now for something completely different. No, it's definitely a lot of the same themes. Something that I will say that is like kind of going off of Haley's point. I think thinking not necessarily like, I don't think there's necessarily a perfect way to write a single resume for every job that you could be interested in. Not to say that anyone else is saying that, but the reason I highlight that is because to what Haley is saying, you're going to get these sort of like algorithms reading and trying to extract information from your PDF, and they could be filtering you. But even if it's not an algorithm that's doing it, it might be someone who's in HR who actually does not understand necessarily almost anything about data science. And to be fair, that's not necessarily their job, right? So they're getting an explanation of what they think the job is from the hiring manager, most likely, and doing a lot of screening for that hiring manager. At least that's how it's worked in my experience so far. And so being really keenly aware of what the job description says for the position that you're applying for, and making sure that the resume that you're submitting has the keywords that they're looking for, has the skill sets that they're looking for, demonstrates the particular competencies that they're looking for. Because there were plenty of people so I hired 3 positions recently, and we got 300 applications for each of them, right? And the amount of filtering that had to happen to get to our final candidates was immense, right? And so we got plenty of applicants who were on paper like, wow, they're definitely better at data science than I am. They're definitely way more competent at XYZ libraries, at XYZ languages. They could probably code me out of code me off the table, whatever you want to say about that. But in terms of the skill sets they were looking for, the way that my team works is because we're so small and we are so constituent oriented and stakeholder oriented, the amount of like intense coding that we do is actually relatively minimal. Really, like the tool sets that we apply are relatively straightforward because it's more about telling a really concise, straightforward story about what we're seeing to drive business decision. And if you don't have an ability to really work with the business stakeholder to understand like what language do they speak? What are they going to respond to? What do they care about? What metrics are important to them? What's going to be compelling to them? If you can't do that work, you can't do this job, no matter how many languages you can code an ML pipeline in. And so that's going to be different than if you're going to be a data scientist or machine learning engineer in a team of 50 of those people, right? And so you need to be really doing a lot of footwork to read between the lines of these job postings to figure out what the team composition is like, what the responsibilities of this role are going to be, and trying to cater that as much as possible. And so then to what Mohammed was saying too, like quantifying your skill sets, quantifying your achievements, thinking about which ones you could pull out that are speaking to those things. So like in my position, it actually isn't that important that you have a bunch of like GitHub stars in an open repo that people are really excited about. That's really cool, but it actually doesn't help you with the job whatsoever. So thinking carefully about like, okay, well, maybe cites on a paper, or maybe, visits to a particular data visualization website, something like that. Like those sorts of things would speak to me more than others. And so that's just going to depend on the job. So the last thing that I'll say with the networking, I think the best experiences of networking that I've had personally have been talking with people who have a close enough understanding of the organization that I want to apply to or want to end up at, so that they can give me that kind of insight and help me read between the lines of a job posting that I wouldn't be able to understand on my own. So when you're networking, obviously take a broad sort of approach, meet with as many people who are willing to speak with you as possible. But especially if you have a job posting that you're particularly interested in, trying to find people who are either at that organization, which would be great, but sometimes they, for various reasons will decide not to. I couldn't meet with anybody who wanted to meet about the job posting that I had just because of volume. If you have connections to people who are either at the organization or at a peer organization, they probably have a lot more context for understanding what's going on in that job posting and what the team is like that they can give you insight into. And so that kind of networking, it's not going to get you necessarily like an immediate interview, but it's going to give your resume and your ability to cater your resume so much more heft in that process. And that's what's going to hopefully carry you through the first couple of rounds. Because what I will say is, speaking, hopefully this is not like an illegal thing to say, but plenty of people tried to network into positions that I was hiring for. And it's really cool that they know XYZ person or they've worked with XYZ person. That might get you an extra look at the resume stage. It's not going to help you when you're getting to the interview round. Like, I'm not going to give you a job just because a friend said that you're smart, right? So really the networking has to help you out in all of these other key places to help you cater to show that you are really what they need and you're the best candidate.
Very interesting. So it sounds like there's like this, you have to have these minimum set of skills that are, portrayed accurately on your resume, probably at a good enough organization level to pass, some automated screener, particularly for these large companies. But then it does seem like, the soft skills went out across the board here. So just a quick follow-up question, and whoever wants to jump in, maybe how does a candidate differentiate based on some of these soft skills that sound really valuable?
I can kind of take it from the resume point, kind of combining in a few things that I feel like people have said. One, algorithmically, using words that are in the job posting can be helpful. So it's like, instead of I like to communicate my findings, means like I love to collaborate. It's like, it's very much a similar skill set, but like it looks one-to-one with some of the words they use. And then two, kind of in that process of defining it out, or like kind of writing out your bullet points, kind of similar to what Mohammed said of like quantifying what output you had. I think it's important to both do that and also like understand the job you're applying for. So if it's like a more technical one, like quantify the increase in accuracy, like your new model gave. Or if it's a more like communicative one, how like you helped like marketing do like this technical project or something like that. Just like, it really is kind of weird in like defining like things you've done in terms of like, what problem did it solve? What did I do? And like, what was the outcome? But yeah, it's almost kind of like, if you can like think of what you would say to like a basic interview question, like you should almost be able to answer that question within a bullet point, but it's like so much easier said than done.
Excellent. Thank you. Any other thoughts from the panel?
One thing I do with all of our final candidates who get to a finalist stage is actually have a half-hour prep call with them before they go before the hiring panel, which I go through every single person they're going to meet with on the hiring panel and what that person will be asking them and what they will be looking for. I've found it intensely helpful in like setting up our candidates for success. I mean, if you get to the finalist stage, you're already pretty darn good. So, but you don't want to fail at the highest level. Like the final round, we should give people enough information that they're all going in with like a pretty equal footing of understanding what is at stake and what people are going to be asking them about. But I've done that also I will say, for people who are applying at other places and people who are applying within my organization, not on our team. I will help walk them through kind of what the interview experience will be like. And I found that has been useful too. Like to Mohammed's point, like finding those mentors and finding people you can call upon and ask, even sometimes like blindly asking, can be incredibly helpful in setting you up for interviewing success. Even if they're at a different organization, they still might have some insight into how Google operates, or how a large company that you're wanting to show up operates, and what they might be looking for. And walking people through and walking yourself through those kinds of steps as you're thinking about interviewing. You're going to do better on the third interview than you're going to do on the first interview almost any time. So you should try that out with a willing participant before you go, to the big show, basically.
Excellent. Any other thoughts? All right, we'll move on. So we'll switch gears a little bit, but this is, important considerations. A lack of diversity is well documented and problem in data scientists and, finding people with data science skills. How do we open up the field to more people? We'll start with Mohammed.
Okay. For this, I would say many people are not actually, especially people in developing countries, are not really aware how data sciences could be useful, even to actually change and transform their life. So creating the awareness is really important, I would say. If there is awareness, then people will be able to do something about it. And additionally, one thing I really noticed is it's not actually just hiring people, doing actually retention and making sure they do advance in their career is really important. And the only way you'll be able to do this is if you actually care. It's not actually just saying that, oh, we hired this much amount of people from this specific country, so we are doing good. You actually have to teach them and mentor them throughout their career so that they could create more people like them, and they could help the people in their community. So this is something I think that should be looked upon.
Excellent. Thank you. We'll move to Brian next.
Yeah, I totally agree with all of that. And thinking about putting a team together right now and thinking about my responsibility within my organization, to this exact point about retention, thinking about how can I right now, before it becomes an issue, push on issues and policies in HR, in promotion practices and performance review practices. How can I look at those things now and make moves in advocacy towards making more equitable systems so that when people do come into our organization, they don't have a fight added them, right? They actually have a path paved for them to promotion, to succeed, to excel, to want to stay here, to contribute, and to feel really good about it. And I think the more footwork that we can do on that end, because it is the case that there's this whole, we can, I'm in the education world, so we talk a lot about pipeline issues, right? Where the training, who goes into training influences who goes into hiring, which influences who ends up staying, which influences who ends up leading. All of those pieces of the puzzle are really important and really problematic these days for all the reasons that you can imagine. And so thinking about what is your locus of control and where can you help support changes? Right now, my locus of control is in the retention and hiring side of things, and being really thoughtful about how do I approach and appraise applicants to these positions, and what are the things that I'm thinking about? What assumptions am I making that I need to challenge? What assumptions are peers making that needs to be challenged verbally? Those are all things that we really need to think a lot about. And there's no one easy solution. I wish we could wave wands and fix these things. But yeah, there's just thinking a lot about what can you and what you do to contribute. I'm thinking about mentorship. I'm thinking about opening up, my availability for people who are interested in networking more often. What kind of time do I spend doing that versus say, helping train people in my education field, right? So I came from the field of education. How can I start working with people who are in that field to think about, oh, can you come over to this field and contribute in different ways? So think about other fields that may have less of those problems of diversity and representation, and seeing if we can open doors for them as well.
Excellent. Meghan.
So a lack of diversity is a well-documented and systemic problem in journalism as well. So we get it double. we get hit twice here. We're very lucky. I actually manage a very diverse team. Part of that existed before I arrived at the post, but part of that was a very specific and planned attempt to create what I've called a data Voltron. When I showed up, it was not helpful to have like 4 people playing shortstop, like which is what they had hired for, because 4 different departments had hired 4 different data journalists, and they all had a very similar skill set. And many of them had very similar backgrounds. Hiring a data Voltron is a way to level up the entire team, because I wanted people with very different skill sets, but I also wanted people with very different backgrounds, because I felt like that would diversify our levels of areas of coverage, things that we were interested in, things that people knew about, things that they had experience in. And then also the different skill sets allows, we have one person on our team who's based in Puerto Rico, and he's an expert in mapping and GIS systems. And so he can train and teach some of the other people on the team more about how they can use spatial analysis in their work. We have, so having that kind of diversity of, expertise as well, broadens everyone's exposure to possible solutions for telling stories. So, and the backgrounds honestly is part of that.
All right. Excellent. Okay, so I'm going to put a little chat here. So Casey made a more convenient link. There's a Google form to enter questions. Those of you who are attending live in person, it's just a go.wisc.edu and then /career panel, one word. That will be a convenient way to get your questions to us, and we're monitoring that form live. So excellent. So let's move on, and then we're going to do a faster round here. In one sentence, what does data science mean to you? Haley, you're up.
Perfect. I think data science means to me the opportunity and excitement and like continual learning and like taking on new challenges.
Excellent. Brian.
Data science is the very broad and complex combination of skills required to think about and understand data rigorously whenever we need to use it.
Very good. Meghan.
To me, is an opportunity for storytelling through different means.
Very good. Mohammed.
Okay. To me, understanding data so that you can solve your community problem better.
Excellent. Very good. Okay, so we're going to switch to some of the audience asked questions. And so we'll start with the first one. What types of skills will help future-proof a career in data science, right? We know that data science, AI is a very fast-moving field. So what types of skills are important to have? We'll start with Haley again on this one.
Perfect. Yeah, I think kind of similar to my last answer, I think like a curiosity to learn and to take on new challenges is definitely something that's required with like the seeming like fire hose of like new models and like things that keep coming out in the world. And then I think beyond that, really kind of like thinking about how like working in like my work in like productionalizing machine learning, a lot of it is like there are a lot of like new tools and a lot of like potentially even like languages or like things that kind of come and go. It's really the ability to kind of understand the full system. So like map out like what needs to be done, as well as kind of like communicate that back. So that might be to like a manager, or like oftentimes like teams need to like work with other teams to actually put models into production or to like move forward. So like maybe it's even people that speak your language, like data scientists to ML engineers, but it could be to people that like don't even speak your language like as fluently, like a back end or like even like a front end, or like how it should be designed out. And so really just like a curiosity in how you like talk to other people in different domains of like your end goal, or I guess, perfect. That's my end.
Sounds good. Mohammed.
Okay. I think if you want to work on the technical aspects of basically data science, knowledge of really strong engineering is really good. Like having the ability to comfortably code any idea you come up with to manipulate the data or understand it is really good. And one other aspect, like which I really understand after I came here, is really good foundational mathematics knowledge could be very essential, especially knowledge in statistics. So yeah, I would recommend people to more invest on that.
Excellent. Meghan.
Yeah, I'm just going to echo what everyone else says. The tools and the languages, they keep changing. So honestly, the biggest thing you can do to bulletproof your career and make it, give yourself a longevity track is to keep learning, to keep trying new things, and to identify projects and places where you may be able to stretch a little bit. Is a great way to kind of keep that skill set fresh and to kind of point at the next biggest and best thing.
All right. And Brian?
Yeah, definitely going to second everything everyone has been saying. One piece that I'll add here is if you can train an intuition for hearing what people really want and understanding especially what leadership and stakeholders are looking for and what they will respond to, I think that's probably one of the best things that you can do, because a lot of the time these stakeholders don't care how you do what they're asking for. And so finding the best way to really give them what they truly want, even if they aren't articulating it well or aren't explaining it directly to you, I think makes you very valuable and very desired in these positions. And the more you can do that and read between those lines, I think the more secure you'll be and the more opportunities you'll get, because you're giving people kind of like what they want without knowing. And I think that's super valuable.
Excellent. Thank you. So then we'll switch the format a little bit. I won't call on our panelists to specifically answer. I'll ask a question, and then whomever wants to speak up can, and hopefully, we'll just go and have our panelists answer as they are able to. There's a lot of, I think, similarity, and you guys are all answering questions very, very well. So the next question is, how important is educational background for candidates? Is it having a specific graduate degree? Is it important to have, certificates? There's a lot of online certificate programs. Is that, boot camp? Are those skills that you consider to be valued when you're looking at candidates, or how do you place those when you're looking at resumes?
Pretty low to not at all.
Okay, so Meghan is saying that some of the the certificates or boot camps. How do you feel in comparison to like a graduate degree, though, in data science?
My experience with boot camps has been it's often given people a inflated sense of how much they know. That they often think that they can hit above their weight. And then they quickly come to the limits of their 12-week program. So would probably say that a graduate degree or an undergraduate degree in the subject would be significantly better. But honestly, like, education is the thing I probably look at least. A decent portfolio of a couple of really strong projects is far more interesting to me, because you can show off your work. And I really love when people can walk me through how they approached a project, and how they kind of came to the decisions they did, because that gives me a really great insight into how they think about data and how they overcome problems when they are doing an analysis.
Very interesting. Thank you. Any other thoughts from our panelists? Haley, I saw you unmuted for a second.
Yeah, I've two. I was gonna first say it, yeah, it's kind of like that. I forget what it's called, like the Benelman's curve, where it's like I know nothing, and then you're like I know everything, and you're like, oh, my master's degree has worn me down. I know nothing again. Like there's so much I don't know. But I yeah, I do think that like yeah, I will say personally, I don't think too much about it, but I do also like it's one of those where it's an unfortunate like thing in the world and the space that with so many candidates coming in, it does go through those like HR processes or things like that. And so people who are less trained to really understand what to look at may like rank it differently or like process your resume differently. So I think it just like pushes it even more so to like ensure that you're like really quantifying your projects or like putting your experience in the forefront when you put it through the resume. And then also on that side note of like obviously applying to the Reach jobs because it's super exciting and like they'll definitely want to have you, but you can also apply and even like reach out to someone on LinkedIn and be like, oh, I applied to your team. It looks really awesome. I've done this project. Hopefully I can talk to you at some point. And if anything, they don't respond, but they got a really nice message. So.
Excellent. Mohammed or Brian, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is another thing where it depends a lot on the organization and it depends a lot on the position. So like in my team, I'm very open and broad with what I think of when it comes to data science skill sets. So like one of the people that I just hired as a senior data scientist has a PhD in political science, about quantitative political science as an example, and then routed into more data science roles afterwards. So I don't think of that as like, oh, like they must have a very specific degree, but there are circumstances in which like HR might require that a certain position title has a certain level of degree. And so paying close attention to like requirements and job listings, not to say that you shouldn't apply just because you don't meet a requirement. I think that's something that a lot of people make a mistake of. It's like discounting themselves, but trying to, again, get a sense of like reading between the lines, like how required is this requirement and what exactly are they valuing about that? So in some research contexts, like certain research think tanks that I know of that I work closely with, they require PhDs above a certain level. And it's like, yeah, they need to have certain levels of assurance that this person has certain skill sets when they're applying for grants to fund the work that they do, all that sort of stuff. So that's a little bit more in the academic world. But definitely would say that don't be afraid to show that you don't necessarily have the most traditional training in the world. And I think really importantly, like the way that I think about it is like, I could do my job well before I got a PhD in education policy, which even in itself is like not the most related degree, right? And so being aware that it's more the person behind the degree and the person behind the credentials than it is about the credentials. Because there are plenty of people who also have my degree who they do wonderful work, they do really important work, they could not do my job either. So it's not a clear signal. And I think being humble about what these things mean is really important on the hiring manager side, but you don't always get that depending on who you're applying to.
Excellent.
Yeah, I think I also agree with Brian. Like I have worked with team members that doesn't even have an undergraduate degree, but they're really progressing in their career. So it depends on the job title. There are some job titles that require PhD, but you shouldn't shy away from applying or trying out because you don't have specific knowledge. I think most people learn while doing their job. And I think different backgrounds really help you in a different way.
Excellent. That's kind of a good segue into our next audience question, which is how important is subject domain knowledge, right? So expertise in biology, geography, public health, criminology, et cetera, in a data science career? Or is it more important just to have these technical skills? What do you think, panel?
Okay, I'll jump in. How do you feel also? But I think that it's sneakily important. So like I can talk about When I like first got my first job, it was in ad tech. I had seen advertisements. I'd watched the Super Bowl, but I was never really driven by advertising. And it was a lot about like, can I like think critically about problems, like think about like feature engineering and things for like this ad tech issue. But one of the things that I think is really interesting about data science is that like especially in like more niche domains, it definitely is something that like I've seen separate like senior and junior data scientists. So it's like if you even think about like your workflow of needing to like feature engineer before you create a model, like knowing a lot about like the specific like area of ad tech or like when like I forget even like who our like data partner was, but like my boss at one point was like, yes, they update every Thursday evening. And it's like, okay, just because he's been doing this forever, like he knows when their like update process time is. But like knowing your space can really help you like connect your model to like business value better, which kind of is like one of the things that like separates like more senior and junior. So I wouldn't think of it in a way of like, especially applying for like more junior roles, like keeping you out of the space, or that like when you take a job, like you're there forever. Cause it's like, I'm now out of ad tech. But at the same time, I do think that like, if you find a space that you really enjoy, like you enjoying it is equally, if not more important than like the data science skills that you'll build within it.
Excellent. Any other thoughts from the panel?
I'd say that's fantastic advice. Domain knowledge is can be incredibly helpful in understanding what data exists, what data you need to create, how you need to capture it, all sorts, how you need to model it, and prevents people from going down problematic paths with different weighting techniques and things like that that can be really problem if you don't understand the domain you're working in. So would very much encourage folks, if they can, and if you have that personal interest and specialty, to really embrace that. It's a huge asset.
Excellent. Any other thoughts from the panelists? It's okay. You don't have to chime in, but if you would do, Mohammed?
No, I just wanted to say, like, I also work with a lot of people who have domain knowledge. I think it's really important. Sometimes these modeling things could go a bit sidetrack because models do hallucinate a lot and people just try to come up with some crazy ideas, and having a domain knowledge really helps. So I think that's a good idea.
And I'll add, I think in my fields, I don't know if this is true across others, but like from the social science side of things, we talk a lot about like, you need to know the data generating process. You need to really understand like, how does this piece of data get collected? How does it get stored? How does it get processed? How does it make its way through the pipeline to what eventually becomes what you end up analyzing? And I think to what everyone's saying here, like, even if you don't have that domain expertise yourself, you need to really have a good sense of what you don't understand about your data that could affect what you do. And then have the willingness and humility to go ask people who probably know a lot more than you, those sorts of questions and what kind of questions are worth asking. And I think the better that you can do that, obviously that's the better it will be. But if you already have that information yourself, that's going to save a lot of time. It's going to save a lot of effort. So that specialization can be super, super valuable. And just spending time in one arena can just really pay dividends.
Excellent. All right, we're going to jump back to a more resume-like question. So what is a red flag that would immediately put an otherwise strong data scientist candidate's resume like in the trash, or I guess deleted file? What do you think, panel? Red flags.
I get a lot of folks from outside journalism believing that they are the single data scientist who's going to revolutionize and change journalism, as if no data scientist has ever approached or come into journalism before, ever in our lives. and they have the answers. And like that is my biggest red flag. All of those go directly to trash. Sorry.
No, that's great. Thank you. Any other thoughts?
I think it's hard to, yeah, it's hard to come up with like a one line or something like that that would like toss it. I saw one the other day that was like black background with white text. That was one that I couldn't even read. So like that, I guess like that like level of like formatting. There was a lot of colors and stuff. But yeah, I think that it really like it's one where it's like your resume should like tell a story of you. And like there are very few things with like most people that is like a immediate throwaway of a candidate, like when you like look at a person like as a whole. So I think just like making sure that it's reflective of like your general skill set or like yourself as you like send it in.
All right, very good. So, and we kind of mentioned this a little bit, but there is always something new, right? Like AI is changing. There's new knowledge. There's new tech. How do you all stay up to date and keep yourself fresh on what's happening in data science?
Maybe I can start. So the way I kind of always update myself is we do have a lot of reading groups here, and I'm a member of a couple of them. So every week and sometimes every 2 weeks, we meet and we read some specific paper, and we share our ideas on it. And I think that really helped me to know what's going on and to actually try some ideas, especially in geospatial science, in weather. There's a lot of papers published every time. So yeah, I use that as a way of updating myself.
We have something extremely similar, not based on papers, but oftentimes we have a weekly Skillshare session where we bring in someone, either an outside speaker or someone on our team or on our engineering or graphics teams, walks through how they did a project. And that kind of like sharing of skills and knowledge is really, really helpful to level folks up.
Yeah, I can share. Like some of my favorite resources. So it's I'll use like most companies will have some sort of like learning stipend. I'll use mine on 2 like monthly subscriptions. So I have both like towards data science as kind of a place where people can like write blogs and almost like learn together. So community is a great one of like seeing like how people might be tackling problems. Another one that I really enjoy just as like my own interest in kind of like applied data science and like how people like think of structuring those together is the like O'Reilly textbooks. So those are like textbooks that are like written by like practitioners. And so I used to like buy them all the time. And I was like, this is not sustainable. I am not in school anymore. I can't afford these textbooks. I never could. And then they have like a monthly subscription thing. So it's like you could like their whole library, like open pass and like kind of like chipping away at like whatever ones I like kind of find interesting. But those are like 2 of mine.
Yeah, I'll also bring back something I think Megan said earlier. Picking projects when you can and have some autonomy over it that are going to be a little bit of a skill stretch for you, where it's like, I think I have the intuition for how to do XYZ thing. And I think, I've done something close enough, but let's do something that's going to be like maybe just one more step beyond what I've been used to in terms of like practicing new skills and having a reason to learn new skills. Just always anchoring it to something useful is nice when you're learning something new. And then, yeah, just similar to what Mohammed was saying, I try to keep on top of a lot of different sort of like research digests in terms of papers that are coming out. And just at the very minimum, just like read abstracts and kind of seeing like, okay, what data are they using? What are they trying to figure out? What methods they use? Is there anything in there that sounds like shocking to me as like, oh, I didn't realize we could do that? Or, oh, that doesn't make any sense. How could they possibly make that work? and then using that as a reason to figure out like, okay, do I need to like retune my intuition? Is there something new coming out that I should definitely keep more on top of? But yeah, definitely a combination of doing a lot of reading, keeping tabs on things, Reddit, Twitter, whatever venues of social media you want to use, following the right people who talk about these sorts of things to be really helpful.
Exactly. Yeah. As a researcher who does a lot of AI research, we spend a lot of time in my research group, keeping up to date. And a lot of it is, following, trusted influencers in some way, like on social media. I think is really helpful. Whether it's LinkedIn, which seems to be gaining in popularity. Sebastian Rashka is a former University of Wisconsin faculty member, has great updates and, all aspects of AI. And, there's a number of newsletters that you can find. That's how I've started getting most of my information now, because it's just so much, so fast. Okay, well, let's talk about the future as well. All right, so data science, again, continues to change. What's your outlook on, what ChatGPT and how that will change software engineering and, I guess, the field of data science? What do you think, panelists?
I
Is it
I
Haley,
talk
you
about
wanna
this
go?
far too
All right.
often, but then other people can jump in. So I don't think it's going to change it that much. I do think that, I think there was a mix of a hype cycle, and then now more focus in on how it can be useful. I think it's uh, like I don't know if I truly believe that the most common coding language is going to be English in a few years, as people keep saying. But I do think that it definitely was very interesting, especially in the realm of generative, the world of generative text, generative images, things like that, will definitely be a major disruption. So I think it's really interesting, especially in journalism, to kind of get that point of view. And then I think in terms of enterprises that are starting to focus in on operationalizing LLMs, my vision for it is that we're actually in the move towards smaller models. So small language models, a little bit more fine-tuned, really pinned to a use case. So in a lot of ways, it still is the exact same data science process that you're learning in your traditional ML techniques or in your classes and things, but with just a different tool set, kind of as we've been talking about. So it with that, it's still gathering some training data, fine tuning it, and kind of having a more specialized, smaller model that is cheaper to run, faster to run, and just as accurate with a lot of the new techniques. So yeah, when LLMs first hit last year, I was like, oh gosh, I'm drowning in the hype. These are too big to productionalize. What are people doing? And then now I've kind of come around to be okay, yes, it is going to fundamentally change ML in many ways, and mostly how people interact with the systems. But the overall data science process, I do, at least at this point in my life, think will stay intact. But other people can have maybe differing opinions too.
So we have it from two different ways. Journalistically, to answer Haley's question, I don't think it's going to be taking our jobs as writers and reporters really soon. I think the news organizations that have experimented with generative stories have largely, honestly, failed in pretty spectacularly bad ways. But we are looking at it as a team right now on a lot of different things, oftentimes to get into issues or stories and tasks that we have found too large for human consumption and human abilities. Things like we have a massive tranche of leaked video or video sources. How can we systematically go through those and detect things in the videos that are similar is something that we are very much aimed at right now and have a lot of work going on around right now. Things like, can we use ChatGPT and LLMs to like classify data, to take that like top level off our plates so we can do a better analysis. Things like huge tranches of text data, SEC reports, a lot of OIG reports we get from the government, that kind of thing, where we have years and years of massive quantities of text and it's all just free-form blob. Can we do a better job of classifying those into something that would make sense and allow us to dig deeper into trends, for instance? So things like that is where a lot of what we're spending a lot of time around tools like ChatGPT and truly using them as analysis tools rather than in like writing stories or something like that.
Yeah, I'll add to that. I mean, I think that's kind of been my whole career to this point in data science. Is like, let's figure out how to use LLMs to analyze things en masse, and then figure out like how trustworthy are these analyses and how do we actually like quantify, is this doing what we think it's doing according to human judgment? And so I think as we go forward, I think that process of like validation and checking and making sure that these things are doing what we think they're doing, and are they trustworthy, I think is going to be increasingly valuable in our skill sets, because it's less the case, to Megan's point, that we're going to get fully replaced wholesale, and more the case that like we might be able to use these to do analyses that we haven't been able to do before. But as we're doing that, the sort of obfuscation of like, how good is this thing and how much are we really getting what we think we're getting out of that, is going to be more and more important for a data scientist to be able to understand and assess and do quickly and do thoughtfully and creatively. Because a lot of times you can't check these things with like out of the box things. You have to get really, really thoughtful about like, well, how do we figure out, is this doing what we think it's doing? So I think that skill set is one that I spend a lot of time thinking a lot about in the applications that I've been using these for. And I think will continue to be really powerful because, exactly as Megan's saying, like we have so much more access to data that will require these tools. But we need to be really careful when we use them.
All right. Thank you. Again, it's such an exciting and fast moving field, and so much changes. So I just have a question. What advice would you give to someone who is looking to apply for a data science job today? Like, what would be the one most important thing that you would tell them that they should do? So I'd like all the panelists. We'll start. Well, we'll let whoever wants to go first, and then we'll work our way around. So, single most important advice.
I'll throw out there. This is probably not going to be as satisfying as people want it to be. Try not to take it personally. There is a lot of weird stuff going on in the job market right now. There are a lot of things about the positions that you have no control over. There are a lot of things about the hiring process that you will not understand and not have any insight into, and you may get rejected many, 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 many times. And trying to just learn what you can from this process and continue going forward and not be discouraged and find ways to keep growing. I think that's the best thing that you can create infrastructure for yourself, because it's a weird situation out there. There are a lot of layoffs going on right now across this field, across industries. And not to like make it sound like dire by any stretch, but like just that I think personal infrastructure is going to be really important, because you're going to be applying a job pretty often. And if you're doing it right, hopping from place to place is something that will happen multiple times throughout your career. And so just having that wherewithal and understanding that you are not your job, you are not your success in the job market. There's just more to it. So just be careful about that.
Excellent. Any other thoughts?
I would say too, as you're in internships or in your first jobs, definitely don't burn bridges or count things out. It's amazing in your career after doing this for a while, how many people come back into your life in another role or in another place, how many people you'll run into at conferences or other places where, it's good to understand kind of that it's a small world out there. So as you're, going through this process. And as Brian said, it is a very tough job market right now. You definitely shouldn't take it personally. I've seen that a lot. But know that the same person who might reject you for one job could be your hiring manager in 5 years, or could be an equal or colleague in 5 years in another role. So definitely play the long game and know that it is a long game.
It's great advice.
Okay. I think for me, I would say, don't be afraid to ask for help, and ask for mentorship, and reach out to someone who work at some company you like to be part of. Right? Just don't be afraid to ask for help. Like, people are really nice. You never know how many people would reply to you and would be willing to help. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think kind of mixing a few, I would say to definitely in the job interview process, talk about your interest in continuous learning and even growth within it. So both knowing that the job market is harder too, of oh, there are so many people that apply to things, but applying to even some stretch roles and making it in your conversations that you're eager to learn and take on challenges is definitely something that people look for, is just kind of that ability to grow within a role or be eager to learn all the new things that come out.
All right. Those are great pieces of advice. So we're going to ask our one final question, and just a little bit early so people have time to transition if needed. Dylan also has some closing slides that he needs to go through. So my final question for you, and again, you all have to answer this one, and whoever wants to answer in whatever order. What do you love most about your work?
I would say the adrenaline rush you'll get when you solve a bug, and yeah, that's the nice part. I like coding, and the fact that I'm doing coding every day is really nice. Yeah. That's what I like about work.
I'll go next because it is fun to see the difference between someone driven by coding and someone driven by being technical but not having to code every second of the day. But I really enjoy the problem-solving skill set of data science, and I really enjoy being in a role now where it's a lot more person-facing. So I do kind of enjoy giving the presentations and talking to people, and that aspect of my role, which I didn't realize was able and a technical skill. So it's fun to find that and also be technical.
I really like having a variety of data challenges. Sometimes it's data collection challenges, sometimes it's data cleaning challenges, sometimes it's presentation and storytelling challenges. So our role is so varied that you never get kind of stuck on one thing for too long before you're faced with another totally different challenge, which can be a lot of fun. Sometimes involves some hair pulling too, but mostly fun.
Yeah, maybe in line with that. Just working in a job that, though it seems like it's very mathematical and very rote, I think it's incredibly creative. I think every day the number of ways you have to approach what you do and think about things in different ways, approach things with different problem solving techniques, try things from a couple of different perspectives. I think it's just a super fun way to spend your time as a career. And I just feel like I learn so much every day, and I think that's great.